welcome to our masterclass for Spain for the on-trade. And the theme of this tasting, we're going to look at 6 wines, and it's 6 Spanish wines for success on your list. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we go along, what I'm talking about there. Just to set the scene for what's happening, this is the first of 6 masterclasses, which are from the Wines from Spain Annual Tasting 2021, the digital events program, which is great. And there's various digital tastings going on with sample packs of mini bottles, which you've obviously got. I think you have all received your wonderful set of little bottles. And if you want to sign up for any others, you can go to the website, which is simply www.foodswinesfromspain.com. So I've done the housekeeping, and hopefully you'll get to try some of the other sessions. Right, now this session, just to set everybody's mind at rest, you all had an email suggesting that you should chill one of the red wines. And I hope nobody's going to fall over in shock here, but it is my plan that we're going to taste the chilled red wine first. So if you'd like to set your wines out on your tasting mat in the same order that they are listed on the other side of the mat, or that they came in your pack, that's the order we're going to taste in, okay? And I will let you know what each wine is as we get there, but just don't be surprised that there's a red first. Okay, so let's just clarify what I mean about wines for success in the on-trade. Daniel, could you pop up the second slide, please? So what's going on here is that I think we're in an environment now where every wine on a list is going to have to do a job. And we've seen a trend for the last year or so before the pandemic for wine lists to get smaller. And I think most hospitality businesses are quite simply not going to have the money to fund a big cellar for the next year or so. And so smaller wine lists with wines that really work and do a job are what restaurateurs are going to be looking for. And what I've done on this slide is to pick out some of the slots which I think Spanish wines could be very helpful with. Now, I haven't mentioned the obvious ones, you know, the old favourites, something like a red Rioja, Reserva or Crianza, which I think almost every list seems to have and which everyone's familiar with. I've gone beyond that today because I think you're all familiar with that. But I'm looking for wines that can fulfill a specific purpose, like helping you to trade a guest up, helping you to fill a slot that's something interesting that you can talk to your guests about, finding a wine by glass that you can sell at a premium price point, perhaps using a caravan, and finding a wine that will work for group dining, which is more and more important, and it's one of the things that the on-trade has seen growing over the last 3 to 4 years. So what we're going to do today is we're going to taste these 6 wines and then have a look at where we think they might fit in this, and I'll be delighted to have any suggestions from anybody as we go along. Also, just so you know, there'll be time for some questions at the end. So we've got an hour session, and we'll have, 10 minutes or so available at the end for questions. Right, so shall we move to the first wine? Daniel, if you can hear me, if you could pop up the first map. Okay, so this is the chilled red wine that I was talking about. This comes from Valencia, Cellar de Roure Safra 2019. And it's quite an interesting wine, and it's from an interesting place. Valencia, most of us think of as, you know, somewhere quite hot, just north of Alicante. We go there for holidays. And in fact, the sub-region, the zone of Valencia that this wine comes from is the Alforens area, which is south of the region. It is just north of Alicante. And it's quite unusual in wine terms. It's quite a fertile region. It's got a sandy clay soil. And the name Alforens actually comes from the Arabic words for abundant wheat, which is rather sweet. But it's high. You know, this is the saving grace with nearly all Spanish wines. They're actually, they've got plenty of altitude, and they tend to get dry winds and you know, plenty of cool weather in the winter and in the evenings. This particular area does have a risk of storms, and in fact the 2019 that we're tasting, the area had a terrible storm in the second part of the harvest with serious flooding. But the saving grace of this wine is that the predominant grape is Mandot, and that is best when it's picked slightly early. So what happened here was that the grape was picked before the disastrous flooding, and actually made a beautiful wine. It was really good weather in the rest of the vintage. Bottle. One of the nice things about this, it's got a really lovely label, which actually represents a dragonfly, and the colour, if you can see it, it's a beautiful yellow colour, dragonfly, and the name Safra is actually the Catalan word for yellow, but the implication of the saffron is that it's good for food. It's good to have with food, which of course is what we want for restaurants. So let's have a taste of this wine and see how it works. See how it works as a chilled red. Now, I think that is super. But the thing to notice is it's got very low tannin. The tannin that's there is quite crisp, quite crunchy. But I think if you were to close your eyes and taste this, or maybe taste it out of a black tasting glass, you would notice the fruitiness, which would take you to a red wine. But if you just looked at the structure of it, you might well be forgiven for thinking this was a white wine. And I think that's partly down to how it's made. This has got very low sulfur. The methods that Pablo Calatayud uses are verging on natural wine, and these are quite old vines, up to 40 years, certified organic, but I believe he uses some biodynamic techniques on them. But the really interesting thing is in the winery, although he vinifies it in stainless steel, he uses indigenous yeast, and then the wine rests, as he calls it, for 6 months in earthenware jars, tinajas. There's no oak treatment at all, and this gives us a very gentle wine. The tannin that's there is light, but it's also soft. I think the flavours are fantastic as well. It's very fresh, but it's got a lovely raw hedgerow character. To me, I would say it's a bit of a blackberry character, but also green figs. It's got that kind of green fruit, wild herbs character to it that lifts it quite a lot. And as I say, you serve this chilled like a white wine, which certainly makes a talking point. So what could you do with this in your restaurant, your bar? Well, my first thought for this was that it would be a fantastic wine for drinking outdoors. And I think obviously everybody is eating and drinking outdoors at the moment. That is about to change, but outdoor dining is going to be very big this year. And I can really imagine this wine served chilled in a carafe with food outdoors, and something you could offer on your buy glass program, but offering maybe a 500ml carafe, something like that, or possibly even a 375ml, whatever you want to do. But for people who want to share a couple of glasses or have it with friends, I think this could be something really interesting to offer. And of course, it's a great talking point if you're going to chill it. Okay, so let's move on to the second wine. And you may be relieved to know that we're back to white wine now. And this is the only wine that isn't currently available in the UK. I thought we could have a look at one wine which isn't available. I should have said actually the last wine is available through Alliance. Okay, so this wine we've got direct from the producer. We only have an ex-seller price for it, about €3.40. I think you would probably find this cropping up at around £10 DPD. That would be my guess. And this is something quite unusual. It's a white grape variety, which we're starting to see a fair bit of from Spain, but still, I think a lot of people don't know it. So the producer is Neo, and the wine is their Albio Mayor 2019. Now, Albio Mayor is the name of the grape. What people might not realize is that there's more than one grape in Spain that's known as Albio. So you'll come across it in Madrid and also in Asturias, but those are different grapes. This is Albio Mayor, which is specifically found in the Ribera del Duero region. So Daniel, if you can put the slide up with the map for this wine. So we associate Ribera del Duero very firmly with red wines, but there is this local grape which makes wonderful whites. And the thing about this grape, it's very early ripening, very pale skin, very small berries, very delicate flavors, subtle floral aromas, and it is quite low in acidity. But I think you're going to find that the minerality of this really takes over and gives it the freshness and crunch and texture that you would normally get with something more acidic. So let's just talk about the bodega, which is really quite unusual. It was formed by three friends in 1999, originally in an old watermill, and then I think they built a proper cellar. And they obviously intend to do things a bit differently. They claim to be the only winery in the world with a music recording studio in their facilities. I don't know if it's actually in the cellar or not, but I guess that could be a way to play music to the wine. The studio is called Neo Music Box, which is something quite unusual, I think. They set out to make affordable wines which are different. And I think what they've done here with this great variety fits the bill quite well. So if you'd like to have a taste of that and have a think about what that wine might work as on your wine list, let's have a think. Okay, so I have to say I'm slightly worried that I can't see comments from people. I was thinking I would probably get some by now. So if that means you can't hear me, then that's a worry. But I've got no way of knowing I can see me. So let's hope it's okay. This wine, I think you'll really notice how phenolic and grippy this is. I think it's quite interesting if we compare it with the red wine we just had. Obviously, the red wine had some tannins in, but this has got a lot of phenolics. It's full of texture. And although the acidity is really quite low, the texture really picks it up and gives it a balanced feel without having a lot of acidity. It's very leesy. It is produced with thyme on the lees, and I find it has a real kind of savoury marzipan, yellow plum, chalky, quite leesy lactic character. Very toothsome. That was one of my words for it. It made me want to drink it. And I think this would be very satisfying with food, but also still refreshing. So what could we use this for? I think this naturally lends itself to or wine like this, given that you can't buy this particular one at the moment. I think this is something to make into a story. I think there's lots of interesting things about it. The grape variety, the recording studio, but other albios might not have that. The special character of the grape, the fact that it's from one of the most famous red wine areas of Spain. And I would see this as a point of difference. So when you're offering wines to a guest, it's always good to have a couple of alternatives. And this is something where you could encourage people to have an adventure, try something different. This would also make a really good, what I would call a story box, where you've picked a wine out, you've made a feature of it on your list, telling people something about it. And equally, because it tells a story, it would work brilliantly as a wine of the month or a sommelier selection or something like that, where it gets the spotlight on it and it's different, and it'll hold a price point on your list and attract people there because it's different. I have just finished talking about the Neo. I hope everybody got that. I'm so sorry about this. I've got two internet routers running, two different internets in case one fails, and still problems. No idea what that's about. Okay, let's have a look at our next wine, our second white wine, which is the Martin Kodak's Lias Alvarinho. Okay, and Daniel, I can see an interesting question there about the last wine. Let's get to questions at the end as we've moved on. So Daniel, if you could pop the map up showing where Rias Baixas is, which I'm sure lots of people know, but I think it's interesting to revisit it and also to understand where this particular wine comes from. So Rias Baixas itself is one of those areas within what gets known as Green Spain, Galicia. So it's the part which sort of hangs out on the top, sort of with sea on two sides and Portugal underneath. And it's much cooler and wetter than the rest of of Spain. And Rias Baixas itself is shown on the map. It has 4 subzones, and Martin Kodak's is in the Val de Salnes subzone, which is right on the coast. It's the southernmost subzone, and it's really close to the sea. It's also fairly high. So the Peredondo vineyard that this wine comes from is 165 meters high. And you've got stacks of Atlantic influence here. Cool summers, the winters don't get too cold, only about 10 degrees centigrade average, quite a lot of rain, 1,200 mil of rain a year, quite sandy granitic soil. And grape growing here is fairly different to the rest of Spain. Martin Kodak's uses a method called the Emperado system with grapes overhead. It's a high system which avoids the dampness of the earth and gets most of the sun. And they're an interesting producer. So Martin Kodak's is not a person. This producer is a co-op that was founded in 1986, and the name Martin Kodak's was the most famous troubadour of Galicia. So this is someone who was a musician who was singing, and predominantly songs about love or the sea, apparently. So there is that link with the sea. And the grape of this area, as I'm sure you all know, is Alvarinho, which again is another early ripening grape with small berries. And Martin Kodak's have done something quite interesting here. They have really championed research into the Alvarinho grape and how to get the best out of it. And they were one of the earliest producers to really get into using lees aging for the wines. So this one, it's fermented in stainless steel vats, but then the wine spends 8 months on the lees. And for the first 2 months, they actually do batonnage. So there's a really marked lees character in this wine. I think what I really like about it is the fact that that character is fully integrated, doesn't hit you at the end. It really shapes the whole wine, but the delicate fruit comes through. This wine is vegetarian and vegan. In fact, most of today's wines are. The 2 winemakers, Katia Alvarez, Luciano Almeida. Katia, when I met her, was in the lab doing sort of non-stop research, which I found fascinating, and I went away, having tried lots of different samples where they were trying different techniques. And I think what they're doing has really paid off, because I think this is a stunning Alvarinho. But let's taste it and see how it comes through. You always get a great aroma from Alvarinho, but this one it could be because I know that they're close to the sea, but as well as a sort of apricot and citrus character, I always sniff this wine and think of a wet beach. Again, a very mineral wine, but I think the main character we've got here is the savouriness of the lees. So it's mineral, it's savoury, and I find it quite linear and incisive, but it is also quite elegant, and it has that lovely silky mouthfeel that comes from the lees work. And for me, a tasting note on the palate is very marmaladey. And something I find quite interesting, until research was done into the grape variety itself, a lot of people used to think that Albarino was actually Riesling that had somehow made its way into Spain and become known by the name Albarino. Now, that's not the case, but it was believed to be Riesling for a long time. And I think this method of production with the lees work produces a wine that puts me in mind of an Alsace Riesling in many ways. It's got that real depth, that texture, and that food friendliness. So I think this would be super. Now, this is, as Albarinos go, this one is from Liberty Wines. It is a bit more expensive than a basic Albarino. So this is a trade up. Okay, so depending on the size of your wine list, lots of guests in restaurants nowadays know Albarino, and to be able to talk to them about this one, which comes from very close to the sea and has this wonderful lees character, I think this makes a great possibility for a trade up. And I'd be interested on your thoughts about that. Okay, so I want to move on to our last white wine, wine number 4, which is the Marqués de Murrieta Capellania 2016. So Daniel, if you could pop the map up for this one. This is our most premium wine today. I think it's quite nice that we're in Spain and our most premium wine today is a white. And I think this wine has a real opportunity to do something good on a wine list. Let's just look at where it's from. Marqués de Murrieta are in Rioja Alta, which is the westernmost part of Rioja. Most of the vineyards are south of the Ebro River. The soil is more red there. When you drive through it, the soil has a really distinctly orangey red colour, very beautiful actually. And that colour comes from iron clay and alluvial soil. And it's also quite sheltered. There's a lot of altitude, fairly high, and it's sheltered by the Cantabrian Mountains. So it's dry, it's hot, and the altitude gives it good acidity. And this wine, of course, it's a Rioja, so its classification is a Reserva Blanco. Now, the regulations for a white Reserva are 2 years in age, of which 6 have to be in barrel. But this particular wine has 18 months in new French oak, plus a year in bottle. So it has a bit more age and a bit more oak than it's required to have. But the fruit is very special, very low yields in the vineyard, very limited production. And the grapes actually come from the highest point on the Igué estate. And they're very old. That estate was planted in 1945, and many of the vines are extremely old. So you've got real grape quality there to take the oak. And I'd like us to taste it and then talk about what I think you could do with this on a wine list. I think it has real opportunities to be good. Okay, so beautiful. The wine has a really limpid look to it, a lovely, very pale golden yellow, the colour from the oak. Wonderful aromas, quite toasty. I get salty ham on, linden blossom, and this is another wine where the smell always takes me to a place. And it's, for me, it's like opening a pottery kiln after you've been firing pots. It's got that wonderful sense of mineral and earth and purity and heat really coming out of the glass. And it's got very layered flavors. The oak's beautifully done, I think. I get nougat, lime, chamomile, and also almost a sort of sappy resinous note there. And it's very precise, and it's got very fresh acidity. And the thing that strikes me about this wine is that it's quite chiseled. It's almost the shape of something like a Polini. Yes, it's perhaps more generous, different grape variety, but it has a real finesse to it. And I think this is where it can become a really useful wine on a list. Now, as we said, this is from Maison Marquet Domaine, and the retail price is quite high, about £40. You would pay less than that, I think, in your restaurants. But what could you do with this? And I think for many restaurants at first sight, this could be quite a hard wine to sell. But I would actually say this could be a really useful wine. And the point is, if you're looking for higher priced white wines, it can be quite difficult. If you want an oaked wine, there's lots and lots of white Burgundy, but not a great deal else. And here we have a wine which has the same pedigree and history as white Burgundy, is made to the same standards, a completely different grape, so it's something novel, something different, quite delicious. And it gives you a real alternative. And if you're running on your by glass program, if you're running a Coravan program, and so you're offering something premium by glass, perhaps in a small portion, and you're looking for something that you're selling, you know, around £100 or thereabouts a bottle. The problem that you will run into with a Coravan program like that is it can be quite hard to find white wines for that slot which are not Burgundy. And so my proposal is that this is what you need. This would make an absolutely fantastic premium glass of wine using a Coravan system. So, you know, you could serve slowly, you wouldn't have to sell it all in a day or two. And I think it would really be a point of difference and something you could talk about, and something that all of your staff could talk about. Very few people who aren't sommeliers or wine specialists feel confident talking about Burgundy, but I think everybody can be got to a point where they can talk about a real that happens to be white, and this is it. I think this is a lovely option. Right, let's go to our red wines, and our last two wines, both red, one unoaked and one in a very classical oaked style. But first of all, the unoaked wine, Bodega del Abad Don Bueno, Mencía 2019. So if we have the map up, please, Daniel. This is from the Bierzo region, which is in Castilla y León. And Mencía, as I'm sure most of you know, is the grape of that region very much. And this winery, again, is quite a recent producer, founded in 2000. And the name Bodega del Abad, Abad translates as abbot. and it's named for the Carethena Monastery, which is very close to the winery. And I should show you the label. Actually, I haven't been showing you all the labels, all of this. But here's the Abad. And you can see it's got the little design at the top, which is the oculus or the window of the winery, of the monastery, where the abbot was from. So that's the reference. That's what the name means. This is their unoaked version. There is a more expensive oaked version. This comes from Amethyst Drinks. It's quite affordable. This is something that could certainly work as a by the glass. But I have another suggestion for how this could work as well. But let's taste the wine and see what you think of it. Now, interestingly, the producer recommends that this wine can work chilled. I think it's got slightly too much tannin for that. Although the tannin is classed as low tannin, I think it is quite chewy tannin. And with that fresh acidity that this wine has, I think it works better at a cool room temperature. And this is really about primary fruit. It's blackberries, very raw fruit, peppery, a real sort of woodland after a thunderstorm feel to it. Very, very subtle on the nose, very compact, but real berries and sweet herbs. And a really quaffable wine. Now, as I said, yeah, you could serve this by the glass, but I think this wine would be spot on for a group dining program. And some of you will know what I'm talking about. Some of you might not have come across it, but more and more on-trade establishments are creating a special short wine list, which is for people booking tables of 6 or more or 8 or more, depending how it works in your establishment, right up to places which are venues that hold events for, 100, 200 people. But the idea is that once you get a group of 6 or 8 people, it's great to get them to pre-order the wine. It would be very difficult for them to choose the wine on the night. There's probably one person in charge of the budget and someone else who knows about wine. So the idea is that you have a short wine list that you can send out to them, get them to pick their wines. And this would fit really well on it. Groups don't tend to spend a fortune on their wines. But what you could do here is you could put this below a more expensive red. And the thing is, Bierzo and the Mencia grape, quite a few people know it now, and it's a style that lots of people would enjoy. It's a very refreshing wine, and it would go great with lots of foods. It's actually, I would say this is a wine that really wants food, which is perhaps got some fattiness or oiliness to it, charcuterie, cheese sauces, also nut-based dishes where if you're offering something vegan, which has got a heaviness to it, like a nut-based dish, this fresh acidity would really lift that. And the wine itself is a vegan and vegetarian wine. And I think, got great potential for being used on a short group dining menu. So that would be my suggestion for that one. Okay, time to have a look at our last wine, which takes us back to Ribera del Duero, but this time in a more expected way. We've now got a red Ribera del Duero. It's a Crianza. It's the Dominio Fornia Crianza 2016. 100% Tinta del Pais, which is Tempranillo, but Tempranillo that has naturalized, if you like, in the Ribera del Duero, where the conditions are quite a bit harsher than in Rioja. Hotter, really continental climate, dry summers, cold winters, very big diurnal range, much colder nights and hotter days, you know, so a slower ripening. But it's Tempranillo, but the Ribera del Duero version. And one of the interesting things I think with this wine is people tend to assume that Ribera del Duero is very expensive. People look at the very high-end ones, you know, those are the ones that tend to get the publicity. This is a Crianza. So it's still not a cheap wine. The retail price is aimed at about £27. It would be a bit less than that for you to buy into your restaurants. Comes from Gonzalez Baez. And I think this is absolutely delightful. Let's taste it and see what we think. Wow, that really delivers. And I think for a lot of people who are a bit scared off by Ribera del Duero sometimes, this is quite an easy wine to transition to from a Rioja. But it's also not as intimidating as some of the more expensive Riberas, which have more oak, more alcohol, or they can do. Okay, this wine, it's got plenty of character. It's, you know, it's 14.5% alcohol. It's had 12 months. It's had total age of 24 months, of which 12 months has been in the barrel. And it's a nice background. Dominio Fournier are one of the oldest estates. They've been making wine there in the Burgos subregion, right by the Duero River, since long before the DO for Ribera del Duero was established. Very high, 820 meters above sea level. As I say, they've been producing for 60 years. They've got some very old vines, but their average age is over 30 years, Goblet trained vines. And this is I think it's a delightful example of the affordable end, perhaps, of Ribera del Duero, but with real class. I think the thing I like about this, I think, as a Ribera del Duero, is that you could have a second bottle. I know that's increasingly rare nowadays. People are drinking less, but this wine, it is elegant. It has a floral elegance to it. It has a good refreshment, good acidity. The producer recommends decanting it, and I definitely would. I was lucky enough to have the bottle, which is rather lovely, and the label shows the Duero River and the estate right beside it. Which is nice. But I was lucky enough to have the bottle a few days ago, and I was able to open and decant, and this wine opens out beautifully. But I think it would work really well in a restaurant environment where it's being poured into probably quite big glasses, which is what you would need for this. And I think it's a great wine to position as something premium on your list. But definitely below the price of the expensive Bordeaux's and Burgundies. It's going to fit in as something that you can get people to trade up to. I think this wine would have another use, which I think would be particularly good. I could really see this working as a pairing in a flight. If you have A tasting menu, if you have a menu where you've paired a drink, wine or some sort of drink to every course, this would be a great way to put in something that really lifts the quality level. It's quite a premium quality, and obviously it's Ribera del Duero, so it's visibly quite, quite a premium wine. But a portion of this in a flight wouldn't cost too much, and this would be absolutely delightful with big food, big flavors. Obviously, meats, come to mind. It depends what your tasting menu has, but if you've got a dish on a tasting menu that's really robust, this wine would just sail through it, and I think it's worth offering. Or you could simply offer a glass of this paired to a big dish on your menu. If your menu allows you to put a wine underneath each item, then that's something you could do, even sell as a package. Okay, well, we've been through all of the wines and we've looked at some of the ways to use them. We're coming up to sort of 10 minutes before the end of the session. I'd be very happy to listen to have comments and questions. It won't surprise you, after all the problems, to know I'm having difficulty seeing the questions. So I might have to ask for some help from Celine or Daniel, because my questions seem to have frozen, and I know there were some earlier.
I can look at the questions for you, Christine. So let me just have a quick browse through.
Okay, so I found one question, and this was about the Albio, and it was a question about whether it could be labelled as Ribera del Duero or Rueda. Rueda has to be the Verdejo grape. So Albio is Ribera del Duero, and I'll just hold it up so you can see the label, and you can see that it says quite clearly that it is Ribera del Duero, and it's got the pink back label for 2019 vintage. So it is a DO. Albio is a part of the DO for Ribera del Duero. Okay. Have we got any other questions there, Celine? I can see some nice comments about the wines.
I think there was a question about the Dominio Fournier Crianza, asking how much you'd be happy to pay for this wine in a restaurant or a wine bar. That was from Keith Haggis.
Okay, hello Keith. How much I'd be happy to pay? Is that the question?
Well, I guess so, or generally a question going round to everyone.
Yeah, okay. It'd be interesting to know what people say. And obviously we haven't got the DPD prices here, but I would think this is going to probably be selling up in the 90s. Now, it's a subject for a different webinar, but I have to say, I think that more and more restaurants will be considering how they price their wines and what percentage profit they take. And I think this is a great example of a wine where it would be worth shaving off a bit of the percentage and actually selling it, So I think if you could sell this in the 70s or 80s, you would get a nice healthy profit, although the percentage would be lower. But as I say, without seeing the DPD, I can't be certain.
There was an interesting point that outside London, it might be slightly lower, so maybe 50, 60 pounds mark.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, London is notoriously more expensive for wine, and as you go outside London, people just won't pay as much, and that's why you have to. I think it's really important to make every wine really work on the list and look at how to position it, what to say about it, how to use it, so that you can sell it. It used to be that writing a wine list was really about, sort of covering all the main regions, covering all the main grapes and styles, and having an even spread of prices. And that was about it. There was a point where that was about it. But things have changed now, and you really have to almost have a plan for each wine that you list as to how you're going to sell it and how you can make it jump off the list and into somebody's glass. So yeah, and obviously knowing your market, which where you're located will have a big impact on that, is vitally important. But even if you're taking a low percentage profit, if you can take maybe £30 cash profit, that's a lot better than selling a wine that will only give you sort of £10 or £15 cash profit. And like I said, that's another discussion, but definitely something to bear in mind.
Thank you. We had another question from Antonio Palmarini. How much white is produced in Ribera del Duero? Not sure if we have that answer handy.
Hi, Antonio. I don't think we do have the answer. My thought is that last time I saw the figures, it was tiny, very, very small amount. And, that's what happens when you're in a region where the red wines are so sought after. Yeah, and also, I think it's taken quite a long time for people to get on board with high quality white wines from Spain. It used to be thought of years ago as just a red wine country. But I think wines like this Albio Mayor, I think they will win a lot of admirers, and I think we will see gradually some more planted. One of the things I don't know, did you hear me say earlier about scanning the code on the sample bottles, or was that when I was offline? Just on the off chance that it's when I was offline, you probably saw that each little sample bottle has a QR code on it. And you might have thought you needed a special app, but actually you just open up your camera and look at it with your camera, and you'll get a message up offering to take you to the website. So all of the information is on the website for all of these wines. Obviously not everything I've said, because that came from some other sources as well. But the information is there. And also, if you didn't hear me say it, you can scroll down below the information and link into the Notable app to keep your tasting notes, which is brilliant. So well done, Wines from Spain, for going paper free. Very environmentally sound and quite right.
I don't think I have any more questions at the moment, okay. Christine, just to let you know.
Okay, well, we're at our finish time anyway, so unless anybody pops any questions through at the last minute, I'm going to say thank you to everybody for coming along, and I hope you enjoyed these wines as much as I did. I really enjoyed picking them, and I think it really makes me feel good, because I think 10 years ago it would have been hard to find such an interesting set of wines, and I hope you'll go away with some ideas for how you can use these, and perhaps chilling some reds and putting some wines in different places on your list, So thank you so much for coming along, and I hope you get to some more of these tastings with wine from Spain.
Alert from Google Chrome.
Ooh.
Mental group.
Sorry about that. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.